Whoa. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Context is Everything Media Network. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, Context is Everything Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook, cover to cover. And today, I will finish reading the textbook. And special announcement at the very end of this video, actually a milestone in my personal life. Stick around and subscribe and like, please. This is the end of this book. I've read the entire thing. Yes, you may notice that the sticky notes only started here. Well, that's because this is more the modern era, and these are the sticky notes that I'm more interested in. Like, I started sticky notes around, let's see. The first one is something about the working class in England during the Industrial Revolution. So I figure that's, it's still pretty relevant to today because it's not that far long ago. Yeah, whatever. Today, I finished the book. Today, we finish the book. This has been 10 months of reading. 10 months. And this is it. This is the end. 1,000 pages. 1,000-page book today. We finish. And thank you. Please subscribe. I'm going to do more things. So I have another textbook aligned to read. And I'm also going to do more modern things because I've set context. Context is everything. Have you been listening? Context is everything. So I've set some historical context by reading an entire outdated history textbook, world history textbook. Now I'm a little bit more poised to speak on modern day things because I've set a little bit of historical context. Is that okay? I don't know, but that's how I chose to start this channel. And that is how we will end this section, this epoch of the channel's history today. And thank you for bearing with me for 2 minutes and 15 seconds while I didn't read the textbook. But please subscribe. Chapter 37, Section 4, and final section of the entire textbook. Now, on the Context is Everything Media Network. That's right. I'm trying to make this the thumbnail that YouTube generates for me. So I'm going to stay here for 4 more seconds. Here it is. Focus on Argentina and Brazil. Setting the scene. 1 year at Rio de Janeiro's annual Carnival parade, a float was based on the story of Alice's adventures in Wonderland. After Alice shrank to tiny size and then grew very tall, a caterpillar on the float asked her, "Who are you?" Who are you? Alice replied, "I no longer know who I am. First I was small like Brazil, underdeveloped with many problems. Suddenly I grew into a butterfly. This could happen to you." The float expressed optimism for Brazil, a nation that was experienced many changes over recent decades. Brazil is one of a dozen independent nations of South America. Here we look at the 2 largest South American republics, Argentina and Brazil. Good. Good, good, good. Alrighty. Where are we here? Sorry, a call came in and it threw me off. So this has been pretty inefficient reading, but it goes up. It goes up. It goes on the internet. Okay. History, geography, and other forces have shaped each of these countries, Argentina and Brazil, and their efforts to develop a stable government and strong modern economy. First heading of the final section, new heading, Dictatorship and Democracy in Argentina. In the early 1900s, Argentina was the largest Spanish-speaking nation in the world and the richest nation in Latin America. It had a fairly stable government dominated by wealthy elite. Its economy was fed by exports of beef and wheat, mostly to Britain. Argentina attracted millions of immigrants whom worked in the factories in Buenos Aires. Then the Great Depression struck. For the next 50 years, Argentina was plagued by economic crises, social unrest, and military rule. Perón in power. In 1946, Juan Perón was elected president. He appealed to the Argentine nationalism by limiting foreign-owned business and promoting import substitution. I don't know what import substitution is. I've mentioned it twice now. By boosting wages, strengthening labor unions, and enacting social reform, Perón won loyalty in the working class. Perón was helped by his glamorous wife, Eva Duarte Perón, who had risen from poverty to fame as an actress. As Perón's chief aide, she had clinics built and gave money to the sick and unemployed. She was also played by Madonna in a movie that, if you took Spanish class in high school in the United States, you probably watched Madonna play Eva Perón. To secure more votes for her husband, she helped women gain the right to vote. Meanwhile, she used public funds to enjoy extravagant lifestyle. "You too will have clothes as rich as mine," she promised the poor women of Argentina. While Juan Perón wooed the urban poor, his authoritarian government stifled opposition. Many educated people fled Argentina. Perón's policies led to huge debt and soaring inflation in 1955. In 1955, Perón was ousted by a military coup and forced into exile. Military rule. For 2 decades, the military was in and out of power, and supporters of Perón urged a return to his policies. In 1973, our aging Perón did return, and he was again elected president. His new wife, Isabel, was chosen vice president. When he died the next year, Isabel Perón became president, the first woman head of state in the Western Hemisphere. As she faced economic and political crises, terrorists on the left and on the right disrupted the country. In 1976, the military took power to combat that coup, I suppose you'd call it. To combat leftist guerrillas, the army waged a dirty war, terrorizing people that they claimed were enemies of the state. They tortured and murdered thousands of citizens. As many as 20,000 people disappeared after being taken from their homes. Weeks after weeks, in the Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires, mothers marched silently, holding pictures of their children who had disappeared. The mothers of the Plaza de Mayo gained worldwide attention. In 1982, the military hoped to mask economic troubles by seizing the British-ruled Falkland Islands. That's a pretty bizarre thing. The women marching the streets. I'm going to put a sticky note on it, just in case that's something that I ever think is interesting to consider again. In 1982, the military hoped to mask economic troubles by seizing the British-ruled Falkland Islands. Argentina had long claimed these islands, which it called the Malvinas. These islands, the military mistakenly believed that Britain would not fight to keep the islands. In a brief but decisive war fought on land, on sea, and in the air, the British recaptured the Falklands, undermined the power and prestige of Argentina's military, and it was forced to hold free elections. Okay, so Britain owns islands off the coast of Argentina currently, as I understand it from that. Why don't we take a little internet on that? British owned Falkland Islands. British owned Falkland Islands. The Falklands are an overseas territory of the United Kingdom, but they are also claimed by Argentina. And so the top news on it is still relating to this April 1982 incident. It sounds like Britain. Why does the UK still own the Falklands? In 2013 sovereignty referendum, almost all Falkland voters in favor of remaining a UK overseas territory. Oh, wow. Pretty decisive there. So, still, the UK, Falkland Islands. Okie dokie. Democracy restored. In 1983, an elected government restored democracy in Argentina. Despite economic setbacks and scandals of corruption, democratic rule survived. Gradually, more and more facts emerged about the military's dirty war against the people. Nearly all who disappeared were murdered, often by being thrown into the ocean from an aircraft. That's a bizarre way to do it. In the 1990s, Argentina's democracy took hold and the economy grew. In the 1990s, Argentina's democracy took hold and the economy grew, aided by plentiful natural resources and the highest literacy rate in Latin America. President Carlos Menem was able to cut inflation and enact government financial reforms urged by the International Monetary Fund. Critics, however, objected to the privatization of government-run industries and noted that unemployment remained high. In some years, one in five adults was jobless. Another persistent problem was the wealth remained concentrated in the hands of a few. In 1999, Argentines elected Fernando de la Rúa president. De la Rúa pledged to work for better living conditions for all Argentines. Brazil. So that was it for Argentina. That was it. Brazil, their people and government. Brazil's people and government. Brazil occupies almost half of South America. Its varied landscapes include the mighty Amazon River and the world's largest tropical forest. Northeastern Brazil, however, is an arid plain. Brazil's rich resources include minerals, timber, and rich farmland that yield cash crops such as coffee and sugar. Geographic conditions have contributed to uneven settlement patterns. About 90% of Brazilians live within 200 miles of the Atlantic coast. Interesting. To draw settlers inland, the government has encouraged the development of the interior, which I believe we talked about in the last section, which involves a massive amount of deforestation, I would assume, right? Most Brazilians are Roman Catholic, but a growing number of people embrace evangelical Protestant faiths. Others practice candomblé, a form of worship that blends African and Christian beliefs. Rapid population growth and class division have contributed to poverty in Brazil. In the cities, more than 75% of Brazilians live. In the cities where more than 75% of Brazilians live, the sharp contrast between rich and poor is seen everywhere. Teeming Garbage-strewn favelas, or slums, ring the major cities, which boast luxurious high-rise apartment buildings and wealthy shopping areas. In the favelas around Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, thousands of homeless children survive on the streets without families or education. How bizarre. Political instability. Like its neighbors, Brazil has had its share of dictators and military rulers. They pursued modernization under the motto, order and progress. Between 1930 and 1945, dictator Getulio Vargas allied himself with the working poor. Like Perón in Argentina, he improved wages and workers' benefits, favored labor unions, and gave women the right to vote. The military eventually toppled Vargas, but they allowed elected presidents to rule Brazil for almost 20 years. The military eventually toppled Vargas, but they allowed elected presidents to rule for almost 20 years. By 1964, economic problems and the fear of communism led to military takeovers again. The seizure of power was quietly supported by the United States, which was even willing to provide some aid to the military. The assistance was not needed. Backed by the military and upper class, the generals ruled with a heavy hand. They tortured and jailed critics, censored the press, and ignored calls for social reform. In the mid-1980s, though, the military gradually eased their grip on power. In 1989, Brazilians were finally able to vote directly for the president for the first time in 29 years. To determine if Brazil should remain a republic or return to being a monarchy, a plebiscite was held in 1993. A plebiscite is a vote in which people approve or reject a proposal. The people of Brazil voted to keep their republic. New heading, possibly final heading of the entire textbook. And thank you for being here this far. Here's an announcement, folks. If you made it this far, now you're going to hear it. This is a monumental moment. If I finish this book in the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Monumental moment for me. Because though I have accreditation as an English major, I have an English major in hand from an accredited university, today will be the first day that I ever read a book cover to cover with my eyes. I've listened to many, but I'm not an avid reader with my eyes. So, though a successful English student and an English teacher for some years, this is the first book I've ever read in my life. Can you believe it? I can. Brazil's economic miracle. New heading. Brazil is a country of the future and always will be. This Brazilian saying suggests both nation's potential and its many setbacks. For more than a century, Brazil has weathered many boom and bust cycles. Early development. In the early 1900s, a huge demand for Brazilian rubber suddenly fell off, causing economic hardship. Coffee then replaced rubber as its major export. But again and again, declining prices for coffee or natural disasters wreaked havoc on the economy. In the 1930s, Brazil moved away from dependence on a single export by diversifying its economy. Vargas encouraged industry, but he built highways, hydroelectric plants, and schools. During and after World War II, industry continued to expand. In the 1950s, President Juscelino Kubitschek promised 50 years of progress in 5. That guy's not Brazilian. That's not a Brazilian name. He opened up the Amazon forest a region to settle by carving out new capital, Brasilia, hundreds of miles from the Atlantic coast. Oh, that's why that's... I remember learning about Brasilia in Spanish class because we would do the map, and I'd say, I never heard of it. Because you only hear of like Rio de Janeiro and the ones on the water. Impressive growth, power in the world, said one Brazilian leader, is a great nation that has territory, population, wealth, and financial resources, technology, material goods, minerals. It's not a very simple definition for power in the world, but I'll take it. Brazil had almost all of these. Under the military, experts ran the economy, which for a time chalked up impressive growth. Brazil began producing everything from steel to cars to shoes. People talked of Brazil's economic miracle like those in post-war Germany or Japan. The miracle enriched a few. To most Brazilians, however, it brought little or no benefit. Economic challenges. In the 1980s, Brazil, like other developing nations, faced a host of economic problems, from inflation fed by higher oil prices to staggering debt. Population growth and migration strained the government's ability to provide services as millions of people flooded Brazil's major cities. Conditions for the poor worsened when the government cut spending in response to the debt crisis. Despite environmental concerns, economic development of the Amazon region continued. One of the most persistent economic problems in Brazil was the unequal distribution of land. Less than 3% of the population owned more than 50% of the land, much of which remained unused. In protest, some Brazilians formed an organization called the Landless Movement. This group urged peasants to become squatters, or people who settle on land that they do not own. Violent clashes erupted between the squatters and the landowners. In the 1990s, President Fernando Henrique Cardoso, a respected economist, provided strong leadership for Brazil. His policies promoted rapid economic growth and helped to limit inflation. In response to the landless movement, he promised to distribute land to nearly 300,000 families. While landowners opposed the president's policy, others accused Cardoso of not doing enough for the poor. Critics of the president also objected to privatization of state-run industries, and many were very concerned about high unemployment rates. Looking ahead, and this is going to be the end of our time here today. Again, this is the first time I'm ever reading a book cover to cover, and now it's on record of me doing it right now. This is it. Finishing the first book I've ever finished with my eyes in my life. And I'm 30 years old. And I have an English degree. Cum laude. Goes to show you something, right? Looking ahead. As the 1900s came to an end, Brazil numbered among the top 10 world economies. With ample human and natural resources, this giant of South America was determined to take its place among the world's economic superpowers and to become the country of the future today. That's it. That's the end of the book. Stay tuned. Next week I'll start another one, and I'll also start another program next week. I promise. God bless. Bye.